I haven't let a man inside my house in 2 years." Those words, spoken across a rain-soaked fence by a woman whose eyes held equal parts fear and desperation, changed everything. Ethan Miller thought he was just being neighborly when he offered to help clear storm debris. He had no idea that simple act of kindness would unravel secrets, shatter walls built from grief, and force him to choose between the safe, predictable life he'd built for his son and a love that terrified him as much as it called to him. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The storm hit Maple Grove at 3 in the morning with the kind of violence that made people believe nature held grudges. Lightning fractured the sky in jagged white scars, thunder rolled through the suburb like artillery fire, and rain hammered against windows with fists that demanded entry. By dawn, the neighborhood looked like a war zone, branches scattered across lawns like broken bones, gutters overflowing with debris, and power lines sagging dangerously low over the streets. Ethan Miller stood in his front yard at 6:30, coffee in one hand and a growing sense of resignation in the other. His son, 7-year-old Connor, pressed his face against the living room window, eyes wide with the kind of excitement only a child could muster for destruction. "Dad, there's a whole tree branch on Mrs. Chen's car." Connor's voice was muffled by the glass, but his enthusiasm came through clear enough. "I see it, buddy. Stay inside while I start cleaning up, okay? Can I help? After breakfast, I need to make sure there's nothing dangerous out here first." Ethan set his coffee on the porch railing and descended the steps, surveying the damage with practiced eyes. He'd been a single father for 5 years now, ever since Sarah decided motherhood and suburban life weren't the adventure she'd signed up for and left them both for a photography career in Portland. 5 years of breakfast routines and homework help, of parent-teacher conferences attended alone, of building a life so stable and predictable that nothing could shake it. Or so he'd thought. The oak tree in his front yard had deposited half its limbs across the lawn. Smaller branches littered the driveway, and one particularly impressive specimen had launched itself over the fence into his neighbor's property. He sighed, grabbed his work gloves from the garage, and got to work. The physical labor felt good. At 42, Ethan kept himself in decent shape, running 3 times a week, weekend hikes with Connor, the occasional basketball game with guys from work. But there was something satisfying about this kind of work, the simple equation of effort and visible results. Drag branch to curb, return for another. Repeat until yard no longer looks like a disaster area. He was halfway through the pile when he noticed her. Lena Parker stood on her front porch, arms wrapped around herself despite the humid morning air. She was staring at her yard with an expression that went beyond dismay into something closer to panic. Her property had taken the worst of it. A massive branch had punched through her porch railing, smaller debris covered every inch of her lawn, and her garden, which Ethan had noticed was usually meticulously maintained, looked utterly destroyed. But it wasn't the damage that caught his attention. It was the fact that she was outside at all. In the 2 years since she'd moved in, Ethan had seen Lena Parker exactly 17 times. He knew the count, because each sighting had been so brief, so unexpected, that he'd found himself noting them like rare bird observations. She appeared to retrieve her mail or accept a delivery, movements quick and efficient, eyes down. Once he'd seen her in her backyard at dusk, standing motionless among her roses. Another time, late at night, he'd glimpsed her silhouette in an upstairs window. Connor had asked about her once. "Why doesn't the lady next door ever come outside?" "Everyone's different, buddy. Maybe she works from home. Maybe she's just private." "Is she sad?" The question had surprised him. "What makes you think that?" Connor had shrugged with the uncomplicated wisdom of childhood. "She looks like you did when Mom left, before you started smiling again." Now, watching her survey the storm damage with shaking hands, Ethan thought his son might have been more perceptive than he'd realized. He finished dragging the last branch from his yard to the curb, then stood there, work gloves dangling from one hand, facing a decision. The old Ethan, the one from before Sarah left, would have immediately offered to help. That Ethan had been friendly, outgoing, quick to engage with neighbors and strangers alike. The new Ethan, forged in the aftermath of abandonment and single parenthood, was more cautious. He'd learned to keep his world small and manageable, to focus on what he could control, to avoid complications. But the branch from his tree was currently destroying her porch railing. That seemed to tip the scales toward neighborly obligation. He crossed to the fence that separated their properties. "Morning." Lena's head snapped up, and for a moment, genuine fear flashed across her face. Then she seemed to register who he was, and the fear transformed into something more controlled. Wariness, maybe, or careful neutrality. "Hello." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Looks like you got hit pretty hard." "Yes." She was still hugging herself, and Ethan noticed her hands were trembling. I'm not sure what to do." "Well, for starters, that branch that came from my tree, I can take care of that. The porch railing's going to need some repairs, but I can do that too if you'd like. I've got tools and some experience with this kind of thing." Lena stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She was probably in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a loose bun and eyes that seemed too large for her face. Pretty in a way that might have been striking if she didn't hold herself like someone expecting a blow. "That's very kind," she said carefully, "but I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. Besides, it's my tree that did the damage. Still, I appreciate it, but I can call someone." "You could," Ethan agreed, "but you'll be waiting days for a contractor to even come look at it, and probably weeks before they can actually do the work. Storm damage means everyone's booked solid. I can start this afternoon if you'd like." He watched her process this, saw something that looked like longing war with something that looked like terror. When she spoke again, her voice was even quieter than before. "I haven't let a man into my house in 2 years." The words hung in the humid morning air between them. It wasn't a rejection. It wasn't an invitation. It was just a fact spoken with the weight of confession. And Ethan understood immediately that she was offering him more than information. She was offering context, an explanation, maybe even a warning. "Okay," he said simply, keeping his voice gentle and non-threatening. "Well, most of the work would be outside anyway. The porch railing, clearing the debris, I wouldn't need to come inside for any of that." Lena's shoulders dropped slightly, tension easing just a fraction. "You're sure it wouldn't be too much trouble?" "I'm sure. Let me finish cleaning up my place and check on my son, then I'll come back over. That work for you?" She nodded, and for the first time since he'd started talking to her, she almost smiled. "Thank you. I'm Lena, by the way, Lena Parker." "Ethan Miller. And that's Connor in the window over there, probably still watching the excitement." They both turned to look, and sure enough, Connor's face was still pressed against the glass, his expression curious and delighted. Lena raised one hand in a small wave, and Connor enthusiastically waved back with both arms. "He seems sweet," Lena said softly. "He's a good kid. Keeps me sane." Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. "I should let you get back to him. I'll see you this afternoon." Ethan returned to his yard, acutely aware of Lena's eyes following him until he reached his porch. When he glanced back, she was already gone, her front door closed firmly behind her. Connor met him at the door, practically vibrating with questions. "Who are you talking to? Is that the lady who lives next door? Why doesn't she come outside more? Is she nice? Can I meet her?" "Whoa, slow down." Ethan ruffled his son's hair. "Yes, that's our neighbor Lena. Yes, she's nice. And the storm damaged her property, so I'm going to help her clean up this afternoon. Can I help too?" "We'll see. First breakfast. Then I need you to do your weekend chores while I finish our yard." Connor groaned dramatically, but didn't argue. They'd established routines over the years, and his son knew which battles were worth fighting. Weekend chores weren't among them. By noon, Ethan had cleared his property, checked in with Mrs. Chen next door about her car, the branch had only dented the hood, and her insurance would cover it, and fielded 3 separate calls from neighbors asking if he could help with their storm damage too. He politely declined, explaining he had a prior commitment. The truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about Lena's confession. "I haven't let a man into my house in 2 years." There was a story there, and while Ethan wasn't naturally nosy, he'd always been drawn to puzzles. People were the most interesting puzzles of all. At 1:30, he loaded his toolbox into his truck, grabbed his chainsaw and work gloves, and knocked on Connor's bedroom door. "I'm heading next door. You okay here for a couple hours? Connor looked up from his video game. Can I come watch? Not while I'm using the chainsaw. Maybe later, if Ms. Parker says it's okay. Okay, can I have a snack? You just had lunch. I'm a growing boy. Ethan laughed. Apple or carrots, nothing processed. You're mean. I'm practical. Love you, buddy. Love you too, mean dad. Ethan crossed the yard with his tools, feeling oddly nervous. He'd helped neighbors with repairs dozens of times over the years. This shouldn't feel different. But it did. Lena must have been watching for him because her door opened before he reached the porch. She'd changed into jeans and a faded blue t-shirt, her hair now pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked younger like this, less fragile, though the wariness in her eyes remained. Hi, she said. I wasn't sure you'd actually come back. I said I would. People say a lot of things. There was no accusation in her voice, just a statement of experience. Ethan hefted his toolbox. Well, I'm here. Let's see what we're working with. The damage was worse up close. The branch hadn't just broken through the railing, it had cracked two of the porch's support posts and punched a hole in the lattice beneath. Smaller branches and debris covered every surface, and the garden that wrapped around the porch's perimeter was utterly destroyed. Roses crushed, stakes broken, soil scattered across the walkway. I spent 2 years on that garden, Lena said quietly, staring at the wreckage. It was the first thing I worked on when I moved in. Every morning I'd come out here and tend it. It made me feel... She trailed off, but Ethan could fill in the blank. Normal, connected, like she had a purpose beyond whatever kept her locked inside. We can save some of it, he said. The roses are hardy. Once we clear the debris, we'll see what's salvageable. You'd be surprised what can bounce back from damage. Lena looked at him, and this time her smile reached her eyes. Is that a metaphor? Maybe. Or maybe I just know a lot about plants from years of Connor bringing home every gardening project his teachers assign. He seems like a good kid. He is. Keeps me honest. Ethan set down his toolbox. Okay, game plan. I'll start with the chainsaw, cut this main branch into manageable pieces. Then we can work on the smaller debris. The railing repairs will take longer. I'll need to get some lumber from the hardware store. Probably come back tomorrow to finish. That okay with you? You really don't have to, Lena. He kept his voice gentle but firm. I know I don't have to. I want to help. Is that okay? She studied him for a long moment, and Ethan had the distinct impression he was being evaluated, measured against some internal standard she'd developed. Finally, she nodded. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Now, I'm going to make a lot of noise with this chainsaw. If you want to go inside, that's fine. Or you can stay and help with the smaller stuff once I'm done cutting. I'll stay, Lena said immediately, and Ethan understood that this was important to her. Staying outside, facing the damage, not retreating into the house that had become equal parts sanctuary and prison. He fired up the chainsaw, and for the next hour, the neighborhood filled with the harsh buzzing whine of blade meeting wood. Ethan worked methodically, cutting the massive branch into sections he could lift, stacking them near the curb for disposal. It was hard, sweaty work, and he lost himself in the rhythm of it. Cut, stack, repeat. When he finally shut off the chainsaw, the sudden silence felt profound. His arms ached pleasantly, and sweat soaked his shirt, but the porch was clear of the major debris. Lena had been working too, he realized. While he'd been cutting, she'd been gathering smaller branches, piling them neatly, sweeping the porch of leaves and dirt. Good work, he said, and meant it. I used to be able to work outside, she said, almost to herself. I had a job, friends, a whole life that happened in the world instead of hiding from it. Ethan pulled off his work gloves, giving her space to continue if she wanted. When she didn't, he asked gently, What changed? Lena was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, still staring at the pile of branches, My father died 2 years ago this spring, and I couldn't handle people anymore. Their sympathy, their expectations, their noise. So I stopped answering the door, stopped going out unless I absolutely had to, and the longer I stayed inside, the harder it became to leave. I'm sorry about your father. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. She said it without bitterness, just exhausted acceptance. He was the only family I had. My mother is, well, she's not someone I can rely on. So when he died, I felt like I died too, in a way. Like the version of me that existed in the world stopped being real. Ethan understood isolation, even if his had come from different circumstances. After Sarah left, he'd withdrawn too, not from the world entirely, but from the possibility of letting anyone close. It was safer to keep things simple, routine, controlled. Do you work from home? He asked. Freelance graphic design. I can do everything remotely. It pays the bills, keeps me busy, gives me an excuse not to go out. But you want to. It wasn't a question. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw the truth in her eyes. The longing, the fear, the war between who she'd become and who she wanted to be again. I don't know what I want anymore, she admitted. I just know this isn't it. They stood there in the afternoon sun, surrounded by storm wreckage and broken gardens. Two people who'd built walls against the world for very different reasons. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the rigid control he'd maintained for so long, a quiet recognition that maybe he wasn't the only one who'd let fear dictate his life. Well, he said, how about we start small? Next step is clearing the rest of this debris. You up for it? Lena smiled, and this time it was genuine and unguarded. Yeah, I think I am. They worked together for the next 2 hours, falling into an easy rhythm. Ethan handled the heavier lifting while Lena swept and sorted, separating salvageable items from trash. Connor appeared around 3:30, drawn by curiosity and the promise of outdoor adventure. Dad, can I... Oh, wow, you guys did a lot. Connor, this is Ms. Parker. Lena, my son Connor. Hi, Connor said, with the unself-conscious friendliness of childhood. Your garden got really messed up. That sucks. Connor, Ethan warned, but Lena laughed, a real laugh, surprised and delighted. It does suck, she agreed, but your dad says we can save some of it. Dad's really good at fixing things. He fixed my bike and my skateboard and the fence and Mrs. Chen's sprinkler system and, okay, buddy, she gets the idea. Ethan felt his ears growing warm. Did you come over to help or just narrate my resume? Help? Can I use the rake? If Ms. Parker says it's okay. Lena looked at Connor, then at Ethan, and something in her expression softened. I'd like that. Thank you, Connor. For the next hour, the three of them worked together, and Ethan watched something remarkable happen. Lena, who'd been so tense and guarded when he'd arrived, gradually relaxed. She asked Connor about school, laughed at his stories about his friends, even showed him the right way to prune damaged rose bushes. Connor, for his part, treated her with the same easy acceptance he showed everyone, asking questions without judgment, offering observations with cheerful randomness. How come you don't have kids? Connor asked at one point, and Ethan nearly choked. Connor, that's personal. It's okay, Lena said quickly. I don't mind. I never found the right person, I guess. But I like kids. I used to volunteer at the library, reading to children during story hour. That sounds cool. Do you have a favorite book? Probably The Secret Garden. Do you know it? No. What's it about? A girl who discovers a hidden garden and brings it back to life. It helps her heal from sadness. Connor considered this seriously. Is that what you're doing? Healing from sadness? Ethan opened his mouth to redirect the conversation, but Lena spoke first, her voice quiet but steady. Yeah, Connor, I think that's exactly what I'm doing. By the time they finished, the sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The porch was clear, the yard was manageable, and Lena's garden, while still damaged, looked less like a disaster and more like a work in progress. I can't thank you enough, Lena said as Ethan loaded his tools back into his truck. Both of you. This would have taken me days on my own. If I'd even been able to start. We're neighbors, Ethan said simply. This is what neighbors do. Still, would you let me pay you? For the supplies, at least? How about this? I'll get what I need for the porch repairs, and we'll call it even. The labor's free. That doesn't seem fair. Life rarely is, but sometimes we get to choose how we respond to that. He smiled. I'll come back tomorrow afternoon to work on the railing. That okay? Lena nodded, and Ethan could see her processing this, adjusting to the idea that he'd be back, that this wasn't a one-time favor, but the beginning of something ongoing. "Okay," she said. "Tomorrow." Connor hugged him as they walked back across the yard. "I like Ms. Parker. She's nice." "She is. She's sad, though." "Yeah, buddy, she is." "Are you going to help her not be sad anymore?" Ethan looked back at Lena's house, where she stood on her now clear porch, watching them. She raised one hand in a small wave, and he waved back. "I don't know if I can do that," he told his son honestly. "But I can help fix her porch. Sometimes that's enough to start." "Start what?" "Healing." Connor seemed to accept this, distracted by the promise of dinner and the video game he'd paused hours ago, but Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Lena's words. "I haven't let a man into my house in 2 years." She'd said it like a warning, or maybe a challenge. Either way, he understood that whatever was beginning between them, friendship, neighborliness, something unnamed, would require patience, respect, and a willingness to move at her pace, not his. He could do that. 5 years of single parenthood had taught him patience, if nothing else. And something in Lena's guarded eyes, some flicker of desperate hope, called to the part of him that Sarah's abandonment hadn't managed to kill. The part that still believed people could heal, that walls could come down, that it was possible to build something new from wreckage. That night, after Connor was asleep, Ethan sat on his back porch with a beer and stared at Lena's house. A single light glowed in an upstairs window. Her bedroom, he guessed. He wondered what she was thinking, whether she regretted letting him help, whether the opening of her door, even just for an afternoon, felt as significant to her as it did to him. His phone buzzed with a text from his friend Marcus. "Storm cleanup party at our place Sunday. Bring Connor. Jenny's making her famous chili." Ethan started to type an acceptance, then paused. Sunday was tomorrow. He'd told Lena he'd come back to work on her porch. Marcus would understand if he took a rain check. Except he'd been taking rain checks on his social life for 5 years now, always with good reasons. Connor needed him. Work was busy. He had things to catch up on at home. One by one, the invitations had slowed, then stopped, until his social circle consisted mainly of polite exchanges with other parents at Connor's school and occasional basketball games with guys who'd known him before. He looked at Lena's lit window again. "Can't make it this time," he typed. "Got a project I committed to. Tell Jenny I'll catch her chili next time." Marcus responded immediately. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just helping a neighbor. The mysterious lady next door? Jenny's been trying to meet her for 2 years." "That's the one." "Interesting. Very interesting." "It's not like that." "Sure it's not." "Have fun with your project." Ethan smiled despite himself and set the phone aside. It really wasn't like that. Lena needed help, and he was in a position to provide it. Simple as that. The fact that he couldn't stop thinking about the way her smile had transformed her face when Connor made her laugh was irrelevant. Mostly irrelevant. Probably irrelevant. He finished his beer and went to bed, and if he dreamed about gardens coming back to life and walls coming down, well, he didn't remember it in the morning. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the storm a memory except for the debris still piled at curbs throughout the neighborhood. Ethan made breakfast, supervised Connor's morning routine, and tried to ignore the nervous energy buzzing in his chest. It was just porch repair. He'd done it a dozen times before. This was no different, except it was. At 1 o'clock, he loaded his truck with the lumber he'd picked up from the hardware store that morning, grabbed his tool belt, and headed next door. Lena was already on her porch, wearing the same jeans and t-shirt from yesterday, her hair loose around her shoulders this time. "You came," she said, and there was surprise in her voice, as if some part of her hadn't believed he would. "Said I would." "People say a lot of things," she repeated her line from yesterday, but this time there was the hint of a smile playing at her lips. "Yeah, well, I'm not people." "No," Lena agreed, studying him with those 2 large eyes. "I'm starting to realize that." They worked together throughout the afternoon, and Ethan discovered that Lena was a quick study. She held boards steady while he cut them, passed him tools before he asked, learned the rhythm of their collaboration without needing constant direction. They talked while they worked, small things at first. The weather, Connor's school, her design projects. But gradually, inevitably, the conversation deepened. Why did your wife leave? Lena asked as Ethan measured a replacement post. He could have deflected. Should have, maybe. But something about the directness of her question, the lack of pity in her voice, made him answer honestly. She said motherhood wasn't what she expected, that she felt trapped, suffocated. She wanted adventure and spontaneity, and we gave her routines and responsibility. He marked the wood with his pencil. One day I came home and she was gone. Left a note, some apologies, and a promise to send child support checks. She's kept that promise, at least. Do you miss her? I miss who I thought she was. The actual person? No, she made her choice. I made mine. To stay. To take care of my son. To build a life that's stable and safe and predictable. To never let him wonder if I'm going to disappear too. Lena was quiet for a moment, then, that must be lonely. Sometimes, Ethan admitted, but Connor's worth it. And I'm good at being alone. Are you? She challenged gently. Or are you just good at convincing yourself you're okay with it? The question hit harder than he expected, and Ethan looked up from his measuring to find Lena watching him with an expression that was part understanding, part challenge. What about you? He asked instead of answering. You said your mother isn't someone you can rely on. What does that mean? Lena's expression shuddered slightly, but she didn't retreat. She's complicated, controlling. She loved my father, but she also resented him for being the center of my world instead of her. When he died, she wanted me to grieve her way, on her timeline. When I couldn't, she decided I was being dramatic, attention-seeking. She doesn't understand why I can't just get over it and move on. Grief doesn't work like that. No, Lena agreed softly. It doesn't. They fell into comfortable silence after that, the kind that comes when two people understand they've shared more than they intended and need space to process it. Ethan worked on the support posts while Lena started replanting the salvageable roses, and the afternoon stretched out peacefully around them. Connor appeared around 4, trailing his friend Jake from 3 houses down. Dad, can Jake and I get ice cream from Mr. Garcia's truck? Ethan checked his watch. It's almost dinner time. Please? We'll eat all our vegetables tonight. That's a bold promise from someone who hid broccoli in his napkin last week. Dad! Connor's face flushed with embarrassment and Jake giggled. Lena laughed too, that same delighted sound from yesterday. Go ahead, Ethan relented, pulling a 10 from his wallet. Get me a drumstick. Thanks, Dad. You're the best. Bye, Ms. Parker. The boys thundered off, leaving Ethan and Lena alone again. He's really sweet, Lena said. You've done a good job with him. Most days I'm just guessing and hoping for the best. Isn't that all parenting is? Probably. Ethan set down his hammer. The posts are done. I just need to attach the new railing sections and we'll be finished. Already? Lena sounded almost disappointed. Well, there's still the lattice work under the porch. That'll take another day if you want me to fix it. I don't want to take up all your time. Lena. He waited until she looked at him. If I didn't want to be here, I wouldn't be, okay? She nodded, but he could see the wheels turning in her mind, the careful calculations of debt and obligation that seemed to govern how she moved through the world. How about this, he said. I'll come back next weekend to finish the lattice, but only if you promise to stop keeping score. What do you mean? I can see you doing it, tallying up what you owe me, trying to figure out how to balance the scales. But that's not how this works. You don't owe me anything except honesty and maybe some of that lemonade you made yesterday. That was really good. Lena smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her whole face. I can manage honesty and lemonade. Then we have a deal. They shook on it, and Ethan noticed how small her hand felt in his, how cold her fingers were despite the warm afternoon. He held on a moment longer than necessary, then released her and went back to work. By the time Connor returned with melting ice cream and chocolate-covered cheeks, the porch was structurally sound again. It would need paint, and the lattice still wanted fixing, but the immediate damage was repaired. Lena walked them back to their yard, lingering at the fence line. Thank you again, she said, for everything. You're welcome. See you next weekend? Next weekend, she confirmed, and Ethan thought he detected something new in her voice. Not just acceptance, but maybe even anticipation. That night, as he tucked Connor into bed, his son asked, "Are you and Miss Parker going to be friends?" "I think maybe we are." "Good. She needs a friend. She gets that same look you used to get before you smiled again." "What look is that?" "Like the sad is so heavy it takes up all the room for everything else." Ethan kissed his son's forehead, marveling as he always did at the child's emotional intelligence. "Yeah, buddy, that's exactly the look. Now get some sleep." "Dad? Yeah? I'm glad you help people, even when it's hard." "Me too, Connor. Me too." The following Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that made people forget winter had ever existed. Ethan woke early, as he always did, and found himself thinking about the lattice work under Lena's porch before he'd even finished his first cup of coffee. Connor noticed over breakfast. "You keep looking at the clock, Dad." "Do I?" "Every 2 minutes. Are you excited to see Ms. Parker again?" Ethan nearly choked on his orange juice. "I'm just planning my day, buddy. Got a lot to do." "Uh-huh, uh-huh." Connor's knowing grin was far too sophisticated for a 7-year-old. "You like her." "I like lots of people." "Not the same way. You smile different when you talk about her." "Eat your pancakes." "I'm just saying that..." "Connor." His son laughed and mercifully changed the subject, but Ethan couldn't shake the observation. Did he smile differently? He'd been so careful to keep things compartmentalized, to treat Lena like any other neighbor who needed help. But somewhere between last weekend's porch repairs and this morning's coffee, something had shifted. He found himself looking forward to seeing her, to the easy rhythm of working alongside her, to the way she'd started to relax in his presence. It wasn't romantic interest, he told himself firmly. It was just nice to have adult conversation that didn't revolve around parent-teacher conferences or work deadlines. That was all. He arrived at Lena's house at 10 o'clock sharp, toolbox in hand. She opened the door before he knocked, and he was struck again by the transformation in her appearance. She wore paint-stained jeans and an old college sweatshirt, her hair twisted up in a messy bun, and there was actual color in her cheeks. "Morning," she said, and her smile was immediate and genuine. "I made coffee and muffins. I hope that's okay. I wasn't sure if you'd eaten, and I thought..." She trailed off, suddenly uncertain, and Ethan realized this was a big deal for her, preparing food for someone, planning ahead for his arrival. Small gestures that probably felt enormous after 2 years of isolation. "Coffee and muffins sound perfect," he said warmly. "Thank you." They sat on her newly repaired porch, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs while birds sang in the trees overhead. The muffins were blueberry, still warm from the oven, and Ethan ate 2 before he could stop himself. "These are incredible, yeah," he said around a mouthful of the second one. "Where'd you learn to bake like this?" "My father taught me. He loved to cook, said it was meditation and creativity combined. After he died, I couldn't stand to be in the kitchen for months. But lately I've been trying again, starting small." "Well, if this is small, I'd love to see what big looks like." Lena's smile widened. "Maybe next time I'll try something more ambitious." Next time. The words hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement that this was becoming something regular, something expected. Ethan found he liked the idea more than he should. They worked on the lattice for most of the morning, and Ethan discovered that Lena had been researching. She asked intelligent questions about measurements and angles, suggested solutions to problems before he'd fully articulated them, and worked with a focused intensity that spoke of someone grateful for purposeful activity. "You're good at this," he observed as she cut a piece of lattice to size without his help. "I used to build sets for community theater," she said. "Before. I'd forgotten how satisfying it is to create something tangible with your hands." "Why'd you stop?" Lena was quiet for a moment, her hand still on the saw. "When my father got sick, I stopped doing a lot of things. Taking care of him became my whole world. And after he died, I couldn't imagine going back to those spaces, seeing those people, pretending to be the person I used to be, so I just didn't." "Do you miss it?" "Every day." She resumed cutting, her movements precise and controlled. But missing something and being ready to return to it are different things. "What would it take?" "To be ready?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Ethan saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the desperate hope warring with bone-deep fear. "I don't know," she admitted, "but this helps. Having a project, Having someone to work with who doesn't need me to explain or justify or apologize for who I've become. You never have to apologize to me, Lena. Not for that. They finished the lattice work by early afternoon, and Ethan was preparing to pack up his tools when Lena spoke again. The kitchen light's been flickering for weeks. I've been meaning to change the bulb, but I can't reach it even with the step stool, and the idea of asking someone to come inside. She took a breath. Would you mind taking a look? If it's just the bulb, I can buy a taller ladder, but if it's something more serious... Ethan understood what she was really asking, permission to let him inside, to cross that boundary she'd maintained for 2 years, to trust him with access to her sanctuary. I'd be happy to look at it, he said carefully, keeping his voice neutral and non-threatening, but only if you're comfortable with that. Lena nodded, more to herself than to him. Okay, yes, come in. The interior of her house surprised him. He'd expected darkness, curtains drawn, the stale air of a space rarely aired out. Instead, sunlight poured through large windows, plants lined the sills, and the walls were covered with vibrant artwork, some of it clearly her own design work, some of it photographs and paintings. It was lived in but not cluttered, creative but not chaotic, a home that reflected someone with taste and intelligence, not the prison he'd half expected. This is beautiful, he said honestly. Thank you. I spend a lot of time here, so I wanted it to feel... She searched for the word. Like a refuge instead of a cage. You've succeeded. The kitchen was equally impressive. White cabinets, butcher block counters, herbs growing in small pots along the windowsill. The light in question hung over a small breakfast table, and when Ethan flipped the switch, it indeed flickered erratically. Could be the bulb, but I'm guessing it's the fixture itself, he said, examining it closely. See how it's flickering in a pattern? Usually means a loose connection somewhere. I can fix it, but I'll need to turn off the breaker first. The panel's in the basement. Lena's voice had gone tight, and when Ethan looked at her, he saw her hands were shaking. I can show you, or you could just tell me where it is if that's easier. She shook her head stubbornly. No, I need to... It's fine. It's just a basement. Follow me. They descended narrow stairs into a finished basement that had been converted into a workspace. A large desk dominated one corner, surrounded by monitors and drawing tablets. Shelves lined the walls, packed with design books and art supplies. And in the far corner, almost hidden behind a storage rack, was a smaller desk covered with framed photographs. Ethan didn't mean to stare, but the photos drew his eye. Lena and an older man, her father clearly, laughing at a beach. The same man teaching a much younger Lena to ride a bike. The two of them in formal wear at what looked like her college graduation. A life captured in still frames. A relationship built on love and trust and shared joy. That's him, Lena said softly from behind him. My dad, Robert Parker. He was a high school English teacher. Loved Hemingway and bad puns and long walks where he'd lecture me about metaphors in nature. Her voice broke. He was only 62 when the cancer came. 62 and healthier than anyone I knew, and then suddenly he wasn't. Lena, the breaker panel's over here. She moved past him quickly, swiping at her eyes. Sorry, I don't usually fall apart like that. You're not falling apart. You're remembering someone you loved. She opened the panel with shaking hands, and Ethan gently moved her aside. Let me. You just tell me which breaker. Kitchen lights. Should be labeled. He found it, flipped it off, and they returned upstairs in silence. Ethan worked on the light fixture while Lena made herself busy wiping down counters that were already clean, and he pretended not to notice when she occasionally paused to compose herself. The problem was exactly what he'd suspected, a loose wire in the fixture itself. An easy fix, 10 minutes of work, and the light was functioning perfectly when he flipped the breaker back on. All set, he announced, descending from the step stool. Should be good as new now. Thank you. Lena leaned against the counter, her arms wrapped around herself in that defensive posture he'd first seen a week ago. I'm sorry I got emotional. You probably think I'm ridiculous. I think you're grieving. There's nothing ridiculous about that. It's been 2 years, Ethan. Everyone else has moved on. My mother certainly has. She sold his car 3 days after the funeral, donated all his books to the library within a month. She said keeping them was morbid. Everyone grieves differently. There's no timeline for when you're supposed to be over it. Tell that to her. She calls once a month to lecture me about wasting my life, hiding from the world, being dramatic. According to her, I should have a new job, a new boyfriend, and a complete personality makeover by now. Lena laughed bitterly. She doesn't understand that I'm not hiding from the world. I'm hiding from people who want me to be someone I'm not anymore. Ethan set down his screwdriver and turned to face her fully. Who are you now? The question seemed to surprise her. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I don't know. Someone quieter. Someone who needs more space. Someone who... She paused, searching for words. Someone who isn't ready to pretend everything's fine when it's not. That's not weakness, Lena. That's honesty. Try telling that to my mother. I'd be happy to if she ever shows up. Lena smiled despite herself. That's a terrifying thought. She'd probably try to recruit you to her campaign to fix me. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. Then what do I need? The question hung between them, vulnerable and raw, and Ethan knew his answer mattered. He chose his words carefully. Time, patience, and maybe someone who's willing to work on projects with you without requiring you to be anything other than who you are right now. Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling too. I think I can manage that. They stood there in her sunny kitchen, and Ethan felt the moment crystallize into something significant, a turning point, an understanding that what was forming between them was more than neighborly obligation or simple friendship. It was recognition, two people who'd built walls for different reasons, acknowledging in each other the courage it took to let someone climb them. I should probably get going, Ethan said eventually, though he found himself reluctant to leave. Connor's with my friend Marcus today, but I promised to pick him up by 4. Of course. Thank you again. For the lattice, for the light, for... She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything words couldn't quite capture. Any time, seriously. She walked him to the door, and as he stepped out onto the porch, she spoke again. Ethan, would you and Connor like to come for dinner this week? Nothing fancy, just I'd like to thank you properly, and I think Connor might enjoy it. Ethan's heart did something complicated in his chest. Dinner. In her house. With his son. Another boundary crossed, another step forward into whatever this was becoming. We'd love that, he said. Connor's been asking about you anyway. Has he? He thinks you're nice, and that you need a friend. Smart kid. Yeah, he is. They settled on Wednesday evening, and Ethan drove home with a strange lightness in his chest that had nothing to do with successfully completing repairs and everything to do with the way Lena had smiled when he'd accepted her invitation. Connor noticed immediately. You're in a good mood. Am I? You're whistling. You only whistle when you're really happy. The repairs went well. Sometimes that's satisfying. Uh-huh. And it has nothing to do with Ms. Parker inviting us to dinner on Wednesday? Ethan nearly drove off the road. How did you... Marcus told you. Nope. I just know things. Connor grinned. So what is it? Spaghetti? Tacos? Please tell me it's not something weird like sushi. I didn't ask. And be polite about whatever she makes. Understand? She's going to a lot of effort. I'm always polite. You told Mrs. Chen her casserole tasted like wet cardboard. It did, but I said it nicely. That's not how nice works, buddy. Connor laughed, and they spent the rest of the drive debating the definition of politeness. But that night, after his son was asleep, Ethan stood at his bedroom window, looking at Lena's house, and wondered what he was doing. He'd built a careful, controlled life. No complications. No risks. Just him and Connor, and predictable routines that kept them both safe. Lena represented the opposite of safe. She was complicated and wounded and fighting battles he could only guess at. Getting closer to her meant opening himself up to messiness, to emotional vulnerability, to the possibility of being hurt again. But when he thought about the way she'd relaxed around him, the way her smile had started to reach her eyes, the courage it had taken for her to let him into her house, he knew he wasn't going to walk away. Whatever this was, wherever it led, he was already too invested to retreat. Wednesday arrived with spring rain that turned the evening cool and cozy. Ethan and Connor arrived at 6:30, Connor carrying a bouquet of flowers they'd picked up at the grocery store. These are for you, Connor announced when Lena opened the door. Dad said it's polite to bring something. They're beautiful. Thank you both. Lena's eyes met Ethan's over Connor's head, and the warmth in them made his breath catch. Come in. Dinner's almost ready. The house smelled incredible. Garlic and herbs and something rich and savory that made Ethan's stomach growl. Lena had set her small dining table with care, cloth napkins and fresh flowers and candles that hadn't yet been lit. Can I help with anything? Ethan asked. Actually, yes. Can you open this wine? I bought it for the recipe, but I'm terrible with corkscrews. They worked together in the kitchen while Connor explored the living room, exclaiming over Lena's artwork and asking questions about every piece. Lena had made chicken piccata with roasted vegetables and homemade focaccia, and the effort she'd put into the meal was obvious. This is way more than you needed to do, Ethan said quietly. I wanted to. She stirred the sauce, not meeting his eyes. I haven't cooked for anyone in so long. I'd forgotten how nice it feels. They sat down to eat, and Connor kept the conversation flowing with his usual enthusiasm, asking Lena about her favorite foods, her favorite colors, whether she preferred dogs or cats, and approximately 17 other random questions. Lena answered each one with genuine interest, and Ethan watched something beautiful happen. She was enjoying herself. Not forcing it, not performing, but actually relaxed and happy in a way he hadn't seen before. This is the best chicken I've ever had, Connor declared around a mouthful of food. Even better than Dad's. Your dad cooks? All the time. He makes really good spaghetti, and his grilled cheese is amazing, and sometimes he makes these pancakes with chocolate chips that are so good, I eat like 5 of them. Sounds like you're lucky to have him, Connor nodded seriously. I am. He takes care of everything. He's like a superhero, but without the cape. Connor, Ethan started, embarrassed, but Lena was smiling. I believe it, she said. He fixed my porch, my lattice, and my kitchen light. Definitely superhero material. See, Dad? Someone agrees with me. After dinner, Connor asked if he could watch something on his tablet, and Lena set him up in the living room with headphones. Then she and Ethan cleaned the kitchen together, falling into the same comfortable rhythm they'd found working on her house. Connor's wonderful, Lena said as she handed him a dish to dry. You're doing an amazing job with him. Most days I have no idea what I'm doing. He doesn't know that. All he knows is that you show up, that you're consistent, that you love him. She paused. That's more than a lot of kids get. Is that what your childhood was like? Inconsistent? Lena was quiet for a long moment, her hands still in the soapy water. My mother loved me, I think, but she loved controlling things more. She had to approve my friends, my clothes, my activities. My father was the buffer. He'd run interference, create space for me to be myself. Without him, she has no one to keep her in check. Exactly. And she's convinced that the way I'm living now is some kind of rebellion against her instead of what it actually is. Which is? Self-preservation. Ethan set down the dish towel and turned to face her. Lena, can I ask you something? Of course. What would it take for you to feel safe in the world again? Not fixed, not over it, just safe enough to start building a life outside these walls. She leaned against the counter, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. I don't know if I'll ever feel completely safe, but lately, having you around, working on projects, having dinner like this, it reminds me that not everyone expects me to be someone I'm not. That's a start. What else would help? Honestly, more of this. Regular interaction that doesn't feel forced or performative. Small steps instead of giant leaps. She met his eyes. Is that selfish? To ask you to keep showing up when I can't promise I'll ever be the kind of person who can fully participate in the world. You're already participating, Lena. You invited us to dinner. You're talking to Connor. You stood in your basement and showed me pictures of your father even though it hurt. Those aren't small things. They feel small compared to what normal people do. There's no such thing as normal. There's just people doing their best with what they have. Lena smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. How are you this patient? After everything you've been through with your ex-wife, how are you not bitter and closed off? Who says I'm not? I haven't dated anyone in 5 years, Lena. I've built my entire life around avoiding emotional risk. Connor's the only person I've let close, and that's because I didn't have a choice. He came prepackaged with unconditional love. He paused, surprised by his own honesty. But maybe we're both learning that staying safe isn't the same as being alive. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Neither of them was quite ready to name. From the living room, Connor laughed at something on his tablet, breaking the tension. I should probably get him home, Ethan said reluctantly. School night. Of course, thank you for coming, both of you. Thank you for having us. Dinner was incredible. They collected Connor, who hugged Lena goodbye with unselfconscious affection. Can we come back soon? I'd like that, Lena said, and Ethan could hear she meant it. Walking home across the yard, Connor asked, Dad, do you think Miss Parker is lonely? I think she's learning not to be. Because of you? Maybe. Or maybe she was ready and just needed someone to notice. I'm glad you noticed. Me too, buddy. Me too. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Ethan would find reasons to visit. A loose gutter that needed securing, a garden bed that wanted building, a squeaky door hinge that needed oil. Lena would inevitably offer coffee, and coffee would turn into conversation, and conversation would turn into hours spent working together on projects that grew increasingly creative. They built raised garden beds and filled them with vegetables. They painted her back fence. They installed a bird feeder and spent an afternoon identifying the species that visited it. Connor joined them sometimes, chattering happily while he helped or played in Lena's yard. Other times it was just the two of them, working in comfortable silence or talking about everything and nothing. Lena started leaving her house more. She'd work in her front garden while Ethan mowed his lawn, waving when he passed. She'd check her mail in the middle of the day instead of waiting until after dark. Small victories that probably seemed meaningless to anyone else but that Ethan recognized for what they were, acts of courage. One Saturday morning in early May, Ethan was replacing a rotted board on his deck when Lena appeared at the fence. Can I hire you for another project? She called. I don't accept payment, remember? Not even in the form of homemade lasagna? Ethan grinned. Well, that changes things. What's the project? Come see. He followed her into her house, a route that had become familiar now, and up the stairs to a second bedroom he'd never seen. It was clearly meant to be an office or guest room, but it had become a storage space packed with boxes and furniture and the accumulated debris of a life put on hold. I want to turn it into a proper studio, Lena explained. Somewhere I can work on personal projects, not just client stuff, but I can't do it alone. There's too much. She gestured helplessly at the chaos. Too much past? Exactly. They spent the next 3 weekends transforming the room. They sorted through boxes, and Lena made hard decisions about what to keep and what to let go. They moved furniture, painted walls a soft cream color that Lena said reminded her of possibility. They installed better lighting and organized her supplies. And through it all, they talked. Lena told him about her father's final days, the way he'd made her promise to keep living, to not let grief consume her. She talked about the guilt of not keeping that promise, the shame of disappointing him. Ethan listened and understood that this was her way of healing, not forgetting, but remembering without being destroyed by it. He told her about the night Sarah left, coming home to find half the closet empty and a note on the kitchen counter. The way Connor had asked for weeks when Mommy was coming home, how Ethan had fumbled through explanations that made sense to a toddler. The slowly dawning realization that he was doing this alone and the fierce determination that had followed, he would be enough. He had to be. You are enough, Lena said quietly when he finished. Connor knows it, even if you don't always believe it yourself. On the third Sunday, they hung the final piece of artwork, one of Lena's own designs, a digital painting of a garden growing wild and free, and stepped back to admire their work. It's perfect, Lena breathed. It's exactly what I wanted. So what are you going to create here? She turned to him, her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. I don't know yet, but I'm excited to find out. They stood in the completed studio, surrounded by the evidence of their collaboration, and Ethan realized something had shifted between them. What had started as neighborly assistance had become friendship, and friendship had become something else entirely, something deeper, more complex, and infinitely more terrifying. He was falling for her. Maybe had been falling since that first morning when she'd admitted she hadn't let a man into her house in 2 years. And the truly scary part was that he thought maybe she was falling too. The storm rolled in on a Tuesday night in late May with none of the drama of the one that had brought them together months before, but with a quiet, relentless intensity that seemed more ominous. Ethan was helping Connor with his science project at the kitchen table when the first drops hit the windows, fat and heavy, with the promise of worse to come. "Looks like we're in for it," he said, glancing at the darkening sky. "Can we watch the lightning?" Connor asked hopefully. "From inside with all the windows closed, and only if you finish explaining photosynthesis to me first." Connor groaned but returned to his poster board, and Ethan's thoughts drifted across the yard to Lena's house. She'd mentioned earlier in the week that her basement had been acting strange, making odd gurgling sounds when she ran water. He'd promised to look at it this weekend, but now he wondered if that would be soon enough. By 9 o'clock, Connor was asleep and the rain was coming down in sheets, hammering against the roof with a violence that made Ethan grateful for solid construction. He stood at his bedroom window, watching water cascade through the gutters, and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in his chest. Lena would be fine. Her house was well maintained now, thanks to all their work together. There was no reason to worry. His phone rang at 11:30, just as he was climbing into bed. Lena's name on the screen sent his heart racing before he even answered. "Ethan?" Her voice was high and tight with barely controlled panic. "I'm sorry to call so late, but my basement is flooding. There's water everywhere, and I don't know what to do, and I tried to go down there, but I can't breathe when I'm coming." He was already pulling on jeans, phone pressed between his ear and shoulder. "Right now, just stay upstairs, okay? Don't try to go back down there." "I'm sorry, I know it's late and Connor's probably asleep." "Lena, stop. I'm coming. 5 minutes." He knocked on Marcus's door. His friend lived 2 houses down and had told Ethan more than once to call if he ever needed anything. Marcus answered in pajama pants and a t-shirt, took one look at Ethan's face, and nodded before Ethan even explained. "Go, I've got Connor. Take your time." Ethan ran through the rain without bothering with a jacket, his toolbox and flashlight clutched in one hand. Lena's porch light was on, and she opened the door before he could knock, her face pale and drawn. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know who else to call, and Show me." The basement stairs descended into 3 inches of standing water that lapped at the bottom step with small, rhythmic waves. Ethan could hear it flowing in somewhere, a steady stream that meant a pipe had burst, or a seal had failed catastrophically. He waded in, the cold water soaking through his shoes immediately, and followed the sound to the far corner where Lena's father's photographs were displayed. Water was pouring from a crack in the foundation, a steady stream that had already destroyed the carpet and was threatening the photographs. Some had fallen from their places on the wall, frames floating in the murky water, images of Lena and her father slowly dissolving. Oh no! Lena had followed him down despite her earlier panic, and now she stood frozen on the bottom step, staring at the destruction. "No, no, no!" "I need to shut off the water main," Ethan said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "Then we can assess the damage. Where's your main valve?" I'm not sure. My dad always handled that kind of thing." "Probably near the water heater. Help me look." They found it behind the furnace, and Ethan shut it off while Lena salvaged what she could of the photographs, her hand shaking as she lifted frames from the water. Some were already ruined, the images blurred beyond recognition. Others might be saved if they were dried quickly enough. She carried them upstairs in shaking arms, and when she returned, tears were streaming down her face. "Everything's destroyed," she said, her voice breaking. "All his books, the photo albums, the letters he wrote me when I was in college. I kept them all down here because I couldn't bear to look at them every day, but I couldn't throw them away either. And now—" She couldn't finish. She just stood there in the flooded basement, shoulders shaking with sobs, and Ethan set down his tools and pulled her into his arms without thinking. She collapsed against him, her whole body trembling, and he held her while she cried for everything she'd lost and everything she was losing all over again. "I'm sorry," she gasped against his soaked shirt. "I'm sorry, I'm falling apart. I shouldn't—" "You're allowed to fall apart. That's what I'm here for. But you barely know me. You shouldn't have to deal with this." "Lena." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, to make sure she was listening. "I'm here because I want to be. Because you called and you needed help, and that matters to me. Okay? She nodded, wiping at her face with shaking hands. Okay. They worked through the night, bailing water and moving everything they could to higher ground. The foundation crack couldn't be fixed until morning. It would need professionals, sealant, maybe structural work. But they could minimize the damage, save what was salvageable, and make the space safe. Ethan called Marcus around 2 in the morning to check on Connor. He's fine. Sound asleep in the guest room. How's the situation? Bad. Foundation crack, major flooding, going to need serious repairs. You need help? Not tonight, but thanks. Tell Lena I'm sorry. That's rough. Ethan relayed the message, and Lena's eyes filled with fresh tears at the kindness of a neighbor she'd never met. They kept working, and as dawn began to lighten the sky, they'd done everything they could. The water was mostly bailed out. The salvageable items were upstairs drying, and Lena sat on her kitchen floor surrounded by damp photo albums, carefully separating pages. Some of these might be okay, she said quietly, her voice hoarse from crying. If I can dry them carefully enough. Ethan sat down beside her, his back against the cabinet, and they worked together in silence as morning light filled the kitchen. His hands were wrinkled from the water, his clothes soaked and muddy, and he'd never been so tired. But when Lena leaned against his shoulder, too exhausted to hold herself upright anymore, he felt something in his chest expand and settle simultaneously. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come, she whispered. You would have figured it out. I don't think so. I would have just stood there and watched it all wash away because I was too paralyzed by panic to move. That's what I do. I freeze. I hide. I let fear make all my decisions. That's not what you did tonight. You called for help. That took courage. It took desperation. Sometimes that's the same thing. Lena was quiet for a long moment, then, Ethan, can I tell you something? Anything. I'm exhausted. I'm so tired of being afraid all the time. Afraid to leave my house. Afraid to let people in. Afraid to live because living means risking loss. And tonight, watching all those memories get destroyed, part of me was almost relieved. Like maybe if the physical reminders were gone, I wouldn't have to carry the grief anymore. She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human. Grief is heavy, Lena. Nobody can carry it perfectly. My father made me promise I'd keep living. Really living, not just surviving. And I've failed him so completely. You haven't failed anyone. You're doing the best you can. My best isn't good enough. Says who? Your mother? Lena flinched. She's going to have a field day with this when she finds out I've let my house fall apart, that I can't even maintain basic property management. This wasn't your fault. Foundations crack, storms happen, and you did exactly the right thing by calling for help instead of trying to handle it alone. She won't see it that way. She'll see it as more evidence that I'm incompetent, that I need her to take over, that I should sell this place and move somewhere she can keep an eye on me. Lena's voice rose with each word, panic bleeding through. She's been looking for an excuse to get me out of here, to force me back into the world on her terms, and now she has one. Nobody's forcing you to do anything. This is your house, your life, your choice. You don't know her. She doesn't respect boundaries. She doesn't understand the word no. She'll show up with contractors and real estate agents and steamroll right over any objection I have. Ethan stood, pulling Lena to her feet with him. Then we don't tell her yet. We get the repairs done, we handle this ourselves, and when everything's fixed, you can decide whether to mention it at all. That could take weeks, months maybe. So, I'm not going anywhere. Lena stared at him, something shifting in her expression. Why are you doing this? Really? You barely knew me 3 months ago, and now you're spending your nights bailing water from my basement and making promises about repairs that aren't your responsibility. Why? It was a fair question, one Ethan had been avoiding asking himself because he wasn't sure he was ready for the answer. But standing in her kitchen with dawn light painting everything gold, exhausted and soaked and more awake than he'd felt in years, he couldn't hide from it anymore. Because somewhere between fixing your porch and building your studio, you became important to me. Because Connor lights up when he talks about you. Because working on projects with you is the best part of my week. Because He stopped, took a breath, made himself say it. Because I care about you, Lena. More than I've let myself care about anyone in a very long time. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the ground would hold or if he'd plummet into empty air. Lena's eyes were wide, her expression unreadable, and for a horrible moment Ethan thought he'd miscalculated, pushed too hard, revealed too much. Then she whispered, I care about you too, and it terrifies me. Why? Because everyone I've ever cared about has either left or died, and I don't think I could survive losing someone else. So I stopped letting people close. It was safer, lonelier, but safer. She took a shaky breath. And then you showed up with your toolbox and your patience and your son who sees right through all my walls, and suddenly safe doesn't feel like enough anymore. Ethan reached for her hand, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Her fingers laced through his, cold and trembling, and he squeezed gently. I'm scared too, he admitted. My ex-wife destroyed my ability to trust that people will stay. I built my whole life around avoiding that kind of hurt again. But Lena, these past few months with you, they've reminded me what it feels like to connect with someone. Really connect, not just exist in parallel. What if we hurt each other? What if I can't be what you need? What if we don't? What if you can? He pulled her closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. I'm not asking you to be anything other than who you are. I'm just asking you to let me keep showing up. For how long? As long as you'll have me. Lena's breath caught, and for a moment they just stood there, hands joined, hearts hammering, balanced on the precipice of something that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and tentative and tasting of salt from her tears. Ethan froze for a heartbeat, shocked, then kissed her back with all the tenderness and longing that had been building for months. It wasn't passionate or desperate. It was gentle and careful and achingly sweet, a kiss that promised patience and presence and the willingness to take things slowly. When they pulled apart, Lena was crying again, but this time she was smiling too. I haven't kissed anyone since before my father died, she said. I thought I'd forgotten how. You definitely haven't. She laughed, the sound watery but genuine, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest. This was right, terrifying and complicated and probably going to be messy, but right. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Connor's asking for you. Everything okay? I should go, Ethan said reluctantly. Connor's probably worried, but I'll come back this afternoon, okay? We'll call someone about the foundation, start making a plan. Okay. Lena walked him to the door, and they stood on her porch watching the morning sun burn off the storm clouds. Ethan, thank you for everything. For coming when I called, for not making me feel broken, for... She touched her lips, smiling. For that. Anytime. All of it. Anytime. He walked home through the wet grass, his heart lighter than it had any right to be given the circumstances. Marcus met him at the door with raised eyebrows and a knowing smile. Productive night? Foundation crack. Major flooding. Total disaster. And the smile? Ethan couldn't help the grin that spread across his face. Also productive. Good for you, man. She seems special. She is. Connor appeared in pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Dad? Is Ms. Parker okay? She's okay, buddy. Her basement flooded, but we got it under control. Can we help her fix it? Absolutely. In fact, I'm counting on your help. Connor beamed and Ethan ruffled his hair, grateful beyond words for a son who understood kindness and care without needing it explained. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. Ethan called in every favor he had with contractors, and they sealed the foundation crack, replaced the damaged drywall, and installed a better drainage system. Lena worked alongside them, learning, asking questions, refusing to be sidelined from the repairs to her own house. The studio they'd built together became command central for the operation, covered in blueprints and work schedules. Connor helped too, fetching tools and keeping everyone supplied with lemonade and cheerful commentary. He'd claimed Lena as his friend, and he took the role seriously, telling her jokes when she looked stressed and showing her pictures he'd drawn of them all working together. You're in all of them, Lena observed one afternoon, looking through his artwork. Well, yeah. You're important. Important people get pictures. The simple logic of childhood, Ethan thought, watching them. Connor had decided Lena mattered, and therefore she did. No complicated analysis, no fear of vulnerability, just straightforward affection. On a Saturday afternoon in early June, Ethan was working on the last section of drywall when the blade he was using slipped. Pain exploded through his palm as the utility knife sliced deep, and blood immediately began pouring from the wound. "Damn it!" he hissed, pressing his other hand against the cut. Lena was at his side in seconds, her face going pale at the sight of blood. "Oh my God. Ethan, you're bleeding everywhere." "It's fine. Just a cut." "That's not fine." Her voice had gone high and panicky, and when Ethan looked up, her eyes were wide with something close to terror. "You need to go to the hospital right now." "Lena, it's really not that bad. I can see bone. That's bad. That's—" She swayed slightly, and Ethan realized with alarm that she might actually faint. "Hey, breathe. I'm okay. Look at me. I'm okay." But she wasn't hearing him. She was staring at his bleeding hand with an expression of absolute horror, her whole body trembling. Connor appeared in the doorway, took one look at the situation, and ran to get the first aid kit without being asked. "Here, Dad. Sit down." Ethan let his son guide him to a chair while Lena stood frozen, her breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. Connor pressed gauze against the wound with surprising competence. They'd dealt with scraped knees and minor injuries enough times that he knew the routine. "Ms. Parker, can you get some ice?" Connor asked, his voice calm and steady. Lena didn't move. She was somewhere else entirely, lost in whatever memory the blood had triggered. Ethan watched understanding dawn on his son's face, the way Connor's expression shifted from practical to gentle. "It's okay," Connor said softly, moving to stand in front of her. "Dad cuts himself sometimes when he's working. He always fixes it. See? The bleeding's already slowing down." "I can't," Lena's voice broke. "I can't lose anyone else. I can't watch someone bleed and not be able to help. Not again." And suddenly Ethan understood. Her father. However he died, there had been blood. Maybe a fall, maybe something worse. She'd watched someone she loved bleed, and she'd been helpless to stop it. "Lena." He kept his voice gentle but firm, commanding her attention. "Look at me. Really look." She dragged her eyes from his hand to his face, and he could see she was barely holding on to control. "I'm fine. It's a cut, and it's going to need stitches, but I'm not dying. I'm not leaving. Do you understand? You don't know that. People leave. People die. 1 minute they're fine, and the next, Lena, breathe with me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Come on." He counted her through the breathing exercise, watching as the panic slowly receded from her eyes. Connor stood beside her, his small hand finding hers, offering comfort with the uncomplicated certainty that had become his hallmark. "I'm sorry," Lena finally whispered. "I'm sorry, I completely overreacted. You're hurt, and I'm making it about me." "Stop. You didn't overreact. You had a trauma response. There's a difference. I should be helping you, not falling apart. You're helping by being honest about what you're feeling. That takes more courage than bandaging a cut." Marcus appeared at the basement door. Ethan had texted him to come watch Connor and took in the scene with quick understanding. "Hospital time?" "Probably need a few stitches," Ethan agreed. "I'll drive. Lena, you want to come?" She looked torn, clearly wanting to, but equally clearly terrified. Ethan made the decision for her. "Stay here with Connor. He can show you how to clean up the workspace. I'll be back in a couple hours, okay?" Relief flooded her face, followed immediately by guilt. "I should come with you." "You should do what feels manageable. Connor, you good here?" "Yeah, Dad. We'll take care of things." At the emergency room, while waiting for the doctor, Marcus studied Ethan with knowing eyes. "So, you're in love with her?" It wasn't a question. Ethan considered denying it, then realized there was no point. "Yeah, I think I am. And she's dealing with some heavy stuff. Her father died 2 years ago. From what I can piece together, it was traumatic. Sudden. And she hasn't processed it properly because she's been too busy surviving. Can you handle that? The trauma, the panic attacks, the baggage?" Ethan thought about Lena's smile when they worked together, the way she'd opened up over the past months, the courage it had taken for her to let him into her life and her house, and eventually her heart. I can handle it. Question is whether she can handle mine. What baggage? You're the most well-adjusted single parent I know. I have an ex-wife who abandoned us, and trust issues that make Fort Knox look welcoming. I've spent 5 years building walls and telling myself I don't need anyone except Connor. Lena's not the only one who's been hiding. Marcus laughed. Well then, sounds like you're perfect for each other. Two emotionally scarred people trying to remember how to be human. What could go wrong? Everything. Absolutely everything. And you're doing it anyway? Ethan thought about the kiss in Lena's kitchen, the way her hand felt in his, the look in her eyes when she'd admitted she cared about him. Yeah, I'm doing it anyway. The doctor gave him 6 stitches and instructions to keep the wound clean and dry. By the time they returned to Lena's house, Connor and Lena had cleaned up the workspace, organized the tools, and were sitting on the porch drinking lemonade. How many stitches? Connor asked immediately. 6. Cool. Can I see? Later, when it's not wrapped up. Lena, I'm sorry about earlier. I should have been more careful. She stood crossing to him with determination in her eyes. No, I'm sorry. I completely fell apart when you needed help. That was human. That was human. He caught her hand with his good one. Can we talk? Alone? Marcus took Connor home with promises of pizza and video games, leaving Ethan and Lena on her porch as afternoon shadows lengthened across the yard. I need to tell you something, Lena said before he could speak. About my father. About how he died. You don't have to. I want to. I need to. She took a breath, steeling herself. He was doing yard work, just normal Saturday morning gardening. He had a massive stroke, just collapsed in the middle of trimming the roses. I found him 20 minutes later when I came over to return a book he'd loaned me. There was blood where he'd hit his head on the stepping stones, and I tried to help him. I called 911. I did chest compressions like they told me to, but there was so much blood and he wasn't breathing and I couldn't make him breathe. Her voice broke, and Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried against his chest. He died in the ambulance, she continued when she could speak again, before we even got to the hospital. And I kept thinking, if I'd just come over earlier, if I'd been there when it happened, maybe I could have saved him. Maybe those 20 minutes made the difference. Lena, a massive stroke. There's nothing you could have done. My brain knows that, but my heart can't accept it. And ever since, whenever I see blood, whenever someone gets hurt, I'm right back there, kneeling on those stepping stones, trying to save someone who is already gone. Is that why you stopped going out? To avoid situations where people might get hurt? Partly, and partly because I couldn't face the world that kept spinning when mine had stopped. Everyone else got to keep living their normal lives while I had this crater where my father used to be, and I couldn't pretend to be okay with that. Ethan understood better now. The isolation wasn't just grief, it was self-protection against a world that felt dangerous and unpredictable. A world where people you loved could bleed out on garden stones while you stood helpless to save them. I should have told you sooner, Lena said, before you got too invested, before Connor got attached. You deserve someone who doesn't have a panic attack every time there's blood. I don't deserve anything, but I want you, all of you, including the parts that are still healing. Why? Why would you choose this? You could find someone easier, someone whole. You are whole. You're just wounded. There's a difference. Lena pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. I'm falling in love with you. And it terrifies me because everyone I've ever loved has left or died, and I don't know how to trust that you'll stay. Ethan felt his heart expand in his chest, felt the truth of his own feelings crystallize into certainty. I'm falling in love with you too. And it terrifies me because the last woman I loved walked away without looking back. And I don't know how to trust that you won't do the same. But Lena. He cupped her face in his uninjured hand, making sure she was listening. I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone without you. She kissed him then, desperate and clinging, and he kissed her back with equal intensity, both of them pouring months of longing and fear and hope into the connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lena rested her forehead against his. This is probably going to be messy, she whispered. Probably. We're probably going to hurt each other sometimes. Probably. But you're staying anyway? I'm staying anyway. Are you? She smiled through her tears. Yeah, I'm staying. They sat on her porch until the stars came out, talking about fears and hopes and all the ways they were both broken and healing. And when Ethan finally went home to relieve Marcus and tuck Connor into bed, he felt lighter than he had in years. Terrified, yes. Uncertain, absolutely. But alive in a way he'd forgotten was possible. The next morning, Lena texted him. Thank you for not running when I fell apart. He replied, thank you for trusting me enough to fall apart in the first place. 3 little dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, coffee later? Always. And Ethan smiled because they were finding their way forward together, one careful step at a time. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more panic attacks, more triggers, more moments when old fears threatened to overwhelm new hope. But they were choosing to try anyway, choosing each other despite and because of their scars. Sometimes, Ethan thought, courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was loving someone anyway, broken pieces and all. The coffee they'd promised each other turned into lunch, which turned into an afternoon working in Lena's garden, which turned into dinner with Connor. Their days began to overlap and interweave, creating a pattern that felt less like dating and more like building a life together in small, deliberate increments. Ethan would find excuses to stop by in the mornings before work, sharing coffee on her porch while the neighborhood woke around them. Lena started joining him and Connor for their evening walks, her steps growing more confident each time they ventured beyond her immediate block. Look how far we went today, Connor announced one evening in mid-June, tracking their route on his fitness watch. That's almost a mile, Ms. Parker. Lena looked genuinely surprised. Is it really? You're doing great, Ethan said quietly, squeezing her hand. They'd started holding hands on these walks, a simple intimacy that felt monumental given where they'd both started. I used to walk everywhere, Lena said, almost to herself. I had this whole route through downtown, past the coffee shops and bookstores. I'd spend Saturday mornings just wandering, exploring. I can't believe I let myself forget what that felt like. You didn't forget. You just needed time to feel safe enough to remember. She smiled at him, and Ethan marveled at how different she looked now compared to that first morning after the storm. The wariness in her eyes had softened into something warmer, more open. She laughed more easily, touched him more freely, and seemed to take up more space in the world instead of constantly trying to make herself smaller. But progress, Ethan was learning, was never linear. There were still days when Lena couldn't make herself leave the house, when the thought of facing even friendly neighbors filled her with paralyzing anxiety. There were still moments when unexpected sounds or situations would send her spiraling into panic. And there were still nights when grief hit her so hard she could barely breathe, calling Ethan at 2 a.m. just to hear his voice and remember she wasn't alone. He took it all in stride, showing up when she needed him, giving her space when she didn't, and never making her feel broken for struggling. In return, Lena began to see and tend to his wounds too. She noticed when work stress made him short-tempered, when memories of Sarah's abandonment made him pull back emotionally, when the weight of single parenthood threatened to crush him under its constant demands. You don't have to be perfect all the time, she told him one evening when he'd apologized for snapping at Connor over forgotten homework. You're allowed to be tired and frustrated and human. I'm his only parent. You have to be present and loving. You don't have to be flawless. Connor knows you love him. One moment of frustration isn't going to undo 5 years of devoted parenting. It was the kind of grace Ethan hadn't realized he needed until she offered it, and he found himself relying on her perspective more and more. She was becoming essential to his life in ways that both thrilled and terrified him. 3 weeks after the basement flooding, on a sunny Thursday afternoon, everything changed. Ethan was at work when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Is this Ethan Miller? A woman's voice asked, crisp and authoritative. Yes, who's calling? My name is Patricia Parker. I'm Lena's mother. I believe you've been spending quite a bit of time with my daughter. Ethan's stomach dropped. He moved into an empty conference room, closing the door behind him. Yes, We're neighbors. I've been helping her with some repairs to her house. Among other things, I'm sure. Patricia's tone dripped with innuendo and disapproval. Mr. Miller, I'm calling to let you know I'll be arriving at my daughter's home tomorrow afternoon. I've heard concerning reports about her property maintenance, and I think it's time someone took a more active role in her affairs. With all due respect, Mrs. Parker, Lena's house is fine. We had a foundation issue that's been completely resolved. There's no cause for concern. That's not what I've heard. My sources tell me there was significant flooding, structural damage, and that Lena was too incapacitated by panic to even assess the situation properly. Does that sound like someone capable of managing a property to you? Ethan felt anger surge through him. It sounds like someone who experienced a crisis and asked for help, which is exactly what she should have done. Who told you about the flooding? I have friends in the neighborhood who keep me informed. The important thing is that I'm coming to evaluate the situation myself. I trust you'll make yourself scarce while I'm there. Family business, you understand. Have you told Lena you're coming? I don't need to announce my visits to my own daughter. I still have a key. The call ended, leaving Ethan staring at his phone in disbelief. He immediately called Lena. Hey, I was just thinking about you, she answered, her voice warm and happy. Connor left his jacket here yesterday. I was going to bring it over. Lena, your mother called me. Silence. Then very quietly, what? She called my cell phone. Said she's coming tomorrow afternoon. She knows about the flooding and she's planning to, I don't know. I think she's planning to push you to sell the house. How did she get your number? How does she even know about you? She said she has friends in the neighborhood keeping her informed. Mrs. Chen. Lena's voice had gone flat and dead. She and my mother used to play bridge together. I should have known she'd report back. I should have... Oh God, Ethan, you don't understand. When my mother gets an idea in her head, she doesn't stop. She'll show up with real estate agents and lawyers, and she'll have a plan, and I won't be able to fight her. I never can. Then we'll fight her together. You don't know what she's like. She's relentless. She'll say terrible things about me, about you, about us. She'll make you question why you'd want to be involved with someone as damaged as I am. Lena, listen to me. I don't care what she says. I know who you are. I know how hard you've worked, how much courage it takes you to get through each day. Your mother doesn't get to define you or make decisions about your life. You're an adult, and this is your house. You don't understand? Then help me understand. Tell me what you need. He heard her breathing, ragged and panicked, and then, I need you to be there tomorrow, when she arrives. I can't face her alone. I've never been able to stand up to her alone. Then I'll be there. What time? She'll come around too. She likes to arrive during lunch, catch people off guard. Ethan, are you sure? She's going to be awful to you. She'll say things. Let her say whatever she wants. I'm not going anywhere. That night, Ethan explained the situation to Connor over dinner. So Ms. Parker's mom is coming and she's not very nice? Connor summarized. That's about right. And you're going to help Ms. Parker stand up to her? I'm going to support her while she stands up to her mother herself. There's a difference. Connor considered this. Is Ms. Parker scared? Very. Then we should make her something to remind her she's brave, like a good luck charm. The simple wisdom of his son never ceased to amaze him. They spent the evening making a card covered in Connor's drawings of gardens and birds, and the three of them together with "You are braver than you think" written across the top in careful block letters. Can I come tomorrow too? Connor asked as they worked. School day, buddy, but we'll tell her you're thinking of her, okay? Okay, tell her she's got this. Ethan delivered the card that night, finding Lena pacing her living room with the manic energy of barely controlled panic. I can't do this, she said when she saw him. I've been trying to prepare, to think of what I'll say, but my mind goes blank when I imagine facing her. She has this way of making me feel like I'm 12 years old again, like every choice I make is wrong, like I'm fundamentally incapable of managing my own life. What does she want? Really? Lena sank onto her couch, and Ethan sat beside her, pulling her against his side. Control. She's always needed to control everything. My clothes, my friends, my career choices. My father was the only thing she couldn't fully control because he wouldn't let her. He protected me, created space for me to be myself. Without him, there's nothing stopping her from trying to orchestrate every aspect of my life. Except you. You can stop her. Can I? I've never managed to before. You've never had a reason to before. What's different now? Lena looked up at him, and something shifted in her expression. You, Connor. This life I'm building. For the first time in 2 years, I have something worth fighting for. Then that's what you hold on to tomorrow. Not what she thinks you should do, but what you actually want. What I want is to keep living here. Keep healing at my own pace. Keep building whatever this is with you. She touched his face, her fingers gentle. But she's going to try to convince me that's impossible. That I'm too broken, too dependent, too incapable of making good decisions. Are you? No. The word came out stronger than either of them expected. No, I'm not. I'm healing. Maybe not on her timeline or in the way she'd prefer, but I'm making progress. Real progress. Well, then that's what you tell her. They spent the rest of the evening preparing, talking through possible scenarios and practicing responses. Ethan showed Lena grounding techniques for managing anxiety, reminded her of everything she'd accomplished in the past months, and promised he'd be right there beside her the entire time. I love you, Lena said as he was leaving. The words came out quiet but certain, and Ethan felt his heart expand in his chest. I love you too. We've got this. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Ethan rearranged his schedule to work from home, watching the clock and fighting the urge to go over early. At 1:30, he saw a sleek black Mercedes pull up in front of Lena's house. Patricia Parker emerged like a force of nature, perfectly coiffed silver hair, designer suit, the kind of presence that demanded attention and submission. She was younger than Ethan expected, probably early 60s, and beautiful in a cold, calculated way. She strode up to Lena's door and let herself in without knocking, and Ethan gave Lena exactly 5 minutes before crossing the yard. He could hear raised voices before he even reached the porch. Ridiculous, Lena. Living like a hermit in this deteriorating house, refusing to maintain even basic. The house is fine, Mother. The foundation issue has been repaired. By some man you barely know. Do you have any idea how inappropriate that is? How it looks? A strange man spending time in your house, taking advantage of your isolation? Ethan knocked firmly on the doorframe, and both women turned to look. Lena's face was flushed and miserable, her hands twisted together in front of her. Patricia assessed him with cold, calculating eyes. Mr. Miller, I presume. I thought I made it clear this was a family matter. And Lena asked me to be here. He looked past Patricia to Lena. Is that still what you want? Lena nodded, and Ethan saw her straighten slightly, drawing strength from his presence. Yes. Please stay. Patricia's expression hardened. Lena, we need to discuss your situation privately. This is embarrassing enough without an audience. There's nothing to be embarrassed about, Mrs. Parker, Ethan said evenly, stepping fully into the house. Your daughter handled a crisis with maturity and resourcefulness. She asked for help when she needed it and managed the repairs responsibly. And who are you to judge what's responsible? You're what, a handyman? A contractor? Some opportunist who saw a vulnerable woman and decided to insert yourself into her life? Mother, stop it! Lena's voice was still shaky but growing stronger. Ethan is my neighbor and my friend. He helped me when I needed it. That's not inappropriate or opportunistic. Friend. Patricia's laugh was sharp and ugly. Is that what we're calling it? Lena, honey, I know you've been isolated, but surely you can see this man has ulterior motives. Men don't spend months doing free repairs out of the goodness of their hearts. Some men do, Ethan said quietly. Some men help because it's the right thing to do, because they care about their neighbors, because they've learned that community matters. How noble, Patricia's voice dripped sarcasm. And I'm sure Lena's vulnerability and this house she owns outright have nothing to do with your sudden neighborly interest. Ethan felt anger flash through him, but before he could respond, Lena stepped forward. Stop it. Just stop. Her voice had gained volume and certainty. You don't get to come into my house and insult people I care about. Ethan has been nothing but kind and patient and respectful. He's helped me more in 3 months than you have in 2 years. Patricia's expression shifted, hurt flickering across her features before hardening into icy control. That's unfair, Lena. I've called every month. I've offered repeatedly to help you move somewhere more manageable, to get you connected with therapists, to control my life according to your plan. That's not help, Mother. That's manipulation. I'm trying to save you from yourself. Look at you, hiding in this house, avoiding the world, wasting your life mourning someone who's been gone for 2 years. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become. The words hit like a physical blow. Lena flinched, her newfound strength wavering, and Ethan saw her start to fold in on herself the way she must have done countless times before. "That's enough," he said, his voice hard. "You don't get to weaponize her grief or speak for a man who can't defend what you're saying." Patricia turned her cold gaze on him. "And you don't get to tell me how to speak to my daughter. You have no idea what our relationship is, what we've been through. You're right, I don't. But I know what I see, and what I see is a woman trying to heal being told she's doing it wrong. There's no wrong way to grieve, Mrs. Parker. There's just the way that works for each person." How enlightened. Did you read that in a self-help book? My daughter needs structure, purpose, professional help, not some divorced handyman playing therapist. Lena's hands had started shaking, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "I have purpose. I'm working, I'm creating, I'm rebuilding my life. Just because it doesn't look the way you think it should doesn't mean it's wrong. Working from home in isolation isn't rebuilding, Lena. It's hiding. I'm not hiding anymore. I go on walks. I have dinner with friends. I'm engaging with the world again, just slowly. At my pace, not yours." "Friends?" Patricia's eyes flicked dismissively to Ethan. "You mean him and his child? That's not a social circle, Lena. That's dependence on someone who will inevitably disappoint you. Like you've disappointed me." The words came out before Lena could stop them, and the shock on Patricia's face was almost comical. "How dare you?" "No, Mother. How dare you? How dare you show up unannounced, let yourself in without permission, insult someone I love, and then act wounded when I defend him? How dare you use Daddy's memory as a weapon against me? How dare you imply that my grief is invalid because it's lasted longer than you think it should?" Patricia's composure cracked, genuine emotion breaking through. "I loved him too, you know. He was my husband for 35 years. But I didn't let his death destroy me. I picked myself up and kept living because that's what adults do." "You picked yourself up by pretending he never existed. You sold his car before his seat had time to get cold. You donated his books, his clothes, everything that reminded you of him. That's not strength, Mother. That's avoidance." "I did what I needed to survive. And so did I. We just needed different things." They stood facing each other, years of unspoken resentment and mismatched grief filling the space between them. Ethan stayed quiet, recognizing this as a moment that needed to happen with or without him there. "I miss him," Patricia said finally, and her voice had lost its sharp edge. "Every single day I miss him, but I can't. I don't know how to sit with that kind of pain, so I stay busy. I make plans. I try to fix things. Including me. Especially you. Because watching you suffer reminds me of my own suffering, and I don't know how to handle that." It was the most honest thing Patricia had said since arriving, and Lena seemed to recognize the significance. "I know you're trying to help in your own way," Lena said more gently. "But I need you to stop. I need you to trust that I'm capable of managing my own life, making my own decisions, even my own mistakes. Even if those decisions include getting involved with a single father you barely know. I know him better than I've known anyone in a long time. And yes, even if it includes that." Patricia looked at Ethan again, really looked at him this time, and he met her gaze steadily. Whatever test she was running, he was determined to pass it. "What are your intentions with my daughter, Mr. Miller?" "To support her while she heals, to be present and patient, to build something real if she'll have me. And if she has another crisis, another panic attack, another breakdown, then I'll be there, just like I was during the flooding. For how long? Until it gets too difficult? Until you realize she's too damaged." "She's not damaged," Ethan said firmly. "She's grieving. And I'll be there as long as she wants me, through whatever comes." Patricia studied him for a long moment, then turned back to Lena. "And you believe him? You trust he won't leave when things get hard?" Lena looked at Ethan, and something passed between them, understanding, commitment, love. I'm choosing to trust him. That's all any of us can do. And the house? You're determined to keep it? It's my home, Mother. It's where I feel closest to Daddy. I'm not selling it. Patricia sighed, and suddenly she looked older, tired. I hate feeling powerless to help you. You can help me by respecting my choices, by calling before you visit, by accepting that I'm doing the best I can. And if your best isn't good enough, then I'll adjust. But that's my call to make, not yours. They stood in tense silence, and Ethan wondered if Patricia would accept this or if she'd dig in her heels and escalate. Finally, she picked up her designer purse and moved toward the door. I still think you're making a mistake, she said at the threshold, but I suppose you're old enough to make your own mistakes. Yes, I am. Patricia paused, looking back at her daughter. He hurt you, your father, by making you the center of his world, by not preparing you to be strong without him. He made me strong by loving me unconditionally. That's a gift, not a weakness. Patricia's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. He loved me conditionally, only when I behaved the way he wanted. Maybe that's why I don't know how to do this differently with you. It was a confession and an apology wrapped together, and Lena's expression softened. We could learn, together, if you're willing to try. I don't know if I know how. Neither do I. But maybe we start with you asking before visiting, and not insulting people I care about. Patricia actually smiled, small and brittle but genuine. I'll try. No promises, but I'll try. She looked at Ethan. Take care of her, or you'll answer to me. Yes, ma'am. She left without another word, and the silence she left behind felt enormous. Lena stood frozen in the middle of her living room, trembling from head to toe. Then, suddenly, she started laughing, great gasping laughs that bordered on hysteria. I can't believe I just did that, she said between breaths. I stood up to her. I actually stood up to her. Ethan pulled her into his arms, and she clung to him, laughing and crying simultaneously. You were amazing. I was terrified. You were terrified and amazing. Those aren't mutually exclusive. She pulled back to look at him, her face flushed and tear-streaked and absolutely beautiful. Thank you for being here, for backing me up without taking over, for letting me fight my own battle while knowing you were there if I needed you. That's what partners do. Partners. She tested the word, smiling. Is that what we are? If you want to be, I want to be. They kissed, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest. They'd faced Patricia together and come through it. Not unscathed, Lena was still shaking, still processing, but intact, stronger even. That evening, they told Connor what had happened, editing out the harsh parts but keeping the victory intact. So Ms. Parker told her mom she gets to make her own choices? Connor asked. Exactly. Good. Adults should get to choose stuff. Did your mom like the card we made? Lena pulled the card from her pocket, where she'd kept it all day. I loved it. It reminded me I was braver than I thought. Connor beamed. See, Dad? I told you it would help. Later, after Connor was in bed, Ethan and Lena sat on her porch, watching the stars emerge. Do you think she'll actually change? Lena asked. I think she'll try. Whether she succeeds is another question. Part of me wants to believe we can have a better relationship. Part of me thinks I should just cut her out entirely. You don't have to decide tonight, or this month, or ever, really. You can keep evaluating, adjusting, setting boundaries as you need them. When did you get so wise? 5 years of single parenthood makes you learn flexibility fast. Lena took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I meant what I said today, about loving you. I know we've only been officially together for a few weeks, but I know. I love you too. He kissed her temple. We're going to be okay, all of us. We're going to figure this out together. Promise? Promise. And sitting there under the stars with Lena's hand in his, Ethan believed it. They had battles ahead. More triggers, more difficult conversations, the ongoing work of healing and trust building. But they'd choose each other anyway, broken pieces and all, building something new and real from the wreckage of their pasts. Sometimes, he thought, The strongest foundations were built on honesty, patience, and the courage to keep choosing love even when fear screamed to run. The weeks following Patricia's visit brought a lightness to Lena's world that she'd forgotten was possible. Standing up to her mother hadn't magically solved everything, but it had shifted something fundamental inside her, a recognition that she could set boundaries, that she could choose herself, that she was stronger than the fear that had governed her life for so long. She started venturing out more, first with Ethan and Connor as her anchors, then gradually on her own. A trip to the grocery store during off-peak hours, a walk to the coffee shop 2 blocks away. Small expeditions that would have seemed insignificant to anyone else but felt monumental to her. Each time she returned home safely, the world seemed a little less dangerous, a little more navigable. Ethan watched her bloom with a mixture of pride and wonder. The woman who'd barely been able to speak to him across a fence 5 months ago now greeted neighbors by name, tended her garden in full view of the street, and had even attended a community meeting about the upcoming neighborhood block party. She still had bad days, still struggled with anxiety and grief, but she was learning to move through those feelings instead of being paralyzed by them. Their relationship deepened in ways Ethan hadn't expected. They fell into rhythms that felt both new and ancient, morning coffee on her porch before he left for work, evening walks with Connor after dinner, weekends spent on projects that were becoming less about necessity and more about creation. They painted her guest room a soft lavender that Lena said reminded her of twilight. They built a bookshelf for Connor's favorite stories that he kept at her house. They planted a vegetable garden that would need tending through the summer and into fall, a commitment to future seasons they'd face together. Connor thrived in the expanding family unit, seamlessly incorporating Lena into his world without the awkwardness Ethan had feared. She came to his Little League games, cheering louder than anyone when he hit his first real home run. She helped with homework when Ethan had to work late, her patience with math problems exceeding his own. She made his favorite blueberry muffins and kept them stocked in her kitchen for his after-school visits. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Connor said one evening in early July as they set the table for dinner at Lena's house, a routine that had become standard 3 or 4 nights a week. "Always, buddy. Are you and Miss Parker going to get married?" Ethan nearly dropped the plates he was carrying. "What makes you ask that?" "Jake's dad got remarried last month, and Jake says that's what adults do when they love each other and spend all their time together. You and Ms. Parker do both those things." From the kitchen, Ethan heard Lena go very still. They hadn't talked about marriage, hadn't even discussed what their long-term future might look like. They'd been so focused on healing and building day by day that neither had dared to articulate hopes beyond the immediate present. "Your dad and I are just taking things one day at a time," Lena said carefully, appearing in the doorway with a serving dish. "We love each other, and we love spending time together, but marriage is a big step that requires a lot of thought." "But you want to, right?" Connor pressed with the relentless logic of childhood. "Because you're happy together. I can tell." Ethan met Lena's eyes across the table, saw his own uncertainty and hope reflected back. "Yeah, buddy, we're happy together." "Then you should get married. That's what happy people do." "It's a bit more complicated than that," Ethan said, but Connor had already moved on to asking if they could have ice cream after dinner, his attention span exhausted by serious adult topics. Later, after Connor was asleep in Ethan's guest room and they were cleaning up Lena's kitchen, she brought it up again. "Do you think about it? Marriage?" Ethan dried a plate slowly, considering his answer. "Honestly, yeah, I do. But I also know we're still figuring things out. You're still healing. I'm still learning to trust again. There's no rush." "What if I want there to be a rush?" Lena set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him. "What if I'm tired of moving slowly and carefully? What if I just want to choose the life I want instead of waiting until I feel ready enough, or healed enough, or whatever enough?" "Lena, I'm serious, Ethan. These past months with you have taught me that waiting for perfect circumstances is just another form of hiding. My father used to say that life is what happens while you're busy making plans. I've wasted 2 years planning to start living again someday. What if someday is now?" Ethan pulled her close, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you. I'm saying Connor feels like my kid too, even though I know he's not. I'm saying this house feels empty when you're not in it. I'm saying..." She took a shaky breath. I'm saying I want you to stay, not just for dinner or for projects or until I'm fixed, because I might never be completely fixed. I want you to stay permanently, both of you. Are you asking me to move in? I'm asking you to build a life with me, here or at your place or somewhere new entirely. I don't care about the logistics. I just know I'm done pretending this is casual or temporary or something we're still testing out. I'm all in, Ethan, if you are. Ethan felt everything in him expand and settle simultaneously. This was what he'd been afraid to hope for. Real commitment, actual partnership, a future that extended beyond careful day-by-day navigation. Sarah had asked him to build a life with her once, and she'd abandoned it when it didn't match her fantasy. But Lena wasn't Sarah. Lena knew exactly who he was, had seen him stressed and frustrated and imperfect, and was choosing him anyway. I'm all in, he said quietly. I have been since that first morning when you told me you hadn't let a man into your house in 2 years, and then let me in anyway. Lena laughed, her eyes filling with tears. That feels like a lifetime ago. It was a lifetime ago. We're different people now. Better people? Braver people. More honest people. People who are learning that being vulnerable with the right person isn't weakness. She kissed him then, deep and certain, and Ethan felt the last of his carefully constructed walls crumble. They'd been protecting him, yes, but they'd also been isolating him, keeping him from the very connection he'd needed to truly heal. They spent the next week talking logistics, planning, imagining. Ethan's house was smaller but had a better yard for Connor to play in. Lena's house had more character but would need another bedroom if they were going to blend their lives fully. They debated and discussed and finally decided to keep both houses for now, spending time in each while they figured out the best long-term solution. We could renovate, Lena suggested one evening, spreading architectural sketches across her kitchen table. Add on to my place, create more space, make it truly ours instead of just mine that you're moving into. That's a lot of work. We're good at work. We've been working on something together since the day we met. Ethan looked at the sketches. A master bedroom addition, an expanded kitchen, a study that could double as a playroom for Connor. It was ambitious, expensive, and exactly the kind of project that would terrify most new couples. But he found himself excited rather than daunted. Let's do it, he said. Let's build something new. They told Connor over breakfast the next morning, watching his face light up with uncontained joy. So I get to have 2 houses? And we're going to make Ms. Parker's house bigger? And I can help with the building. That's the plan, buddy. What do you think? I think it's the best idea ever. Can my room have a window that looks at the garden? And can we paint it blue? And can... Slow down, Lena laughed. We'll design your room together, okay? You get to help decide everything. Connor threw his arms around her neck, nearly knocking over his orange juice. You're the best almost stepmom ever. Lena's eyes met Ethan's over Connor's head, and he saw the same emotion he was feeling, overwhelming love for this child who accepted change with such open-hearted trust, who'd chosen Lena as family without needing legal documents or formal ceremonies to validate the relationship. Patricia called that afternoon, her timing either impeccable or unfortunate, depending on perspective. Lena, I've been thinking about our last conversation, she began without preamble, and I want to apologize. Properly apologize. Not just say I'll try to do better. Lena switched the phone to speaker so Ethan could hear. I'm listening. I've been controlling because I was terrified. After your father died, I couldn't control my grief, couldn't control the emptiness, couldn't control anything. So I tried to control you instead. It wasn't fair and it wasn't healthy, and I'm sorry. It was perhaps the most honest thing Patricia had ever said to her daughter, and Lena felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of understanding. Thank you for saying that. I've also been thinking about that man of yours, Ethan. He's here, actually. You're on speaker. A pause, then, good. He should hear this too. I was wrong about you, Mr. Miller. I let my fear and my need for control make me see threats where there weren't any. Lena seems happy, genuinely happy, for the first time since Robert died. That's worth more than my comfort or my plans. I appreciate that, Mrs. Parker, Ethan said carefully. Patricia, please, If you're going to be part of my daughter's life, we should at least be on first-name terms. Another pause. Are you going to be part of her life long-term? Lena answered before Ethan could. He's moving in, Mom. We're renovating the house together. We're building a life. There was silence on the other end, long enough that Lena wondered if the call had dropped. Then, that's wonderful, honey. Truly, I'm happy for you. And the surprising thing was, she sounded like she meant it. The renovation began in August, turning Lena's house into a construction zone of possibility. They worked alongside the contractors, doing what they could themselves to save money and maintain the sense of creation that had become their foundation. Connor helped paint walls, his careful strokes creating memories in every brushstroke. Lena designed custom shelving for their combined book collection, blending her father's volumes with Ethan's favorites and creating space for new stories they'd discover together. Marcus and his wife Jenny became regular fixtures, helping with projects and bringing casseroles when the kitchen was unusable. Other neighbors joined in too, and Lena found herself at the center of a community she'd been too afraid to acknowledge for so long. Mrs. Chen apologized tearfully for reporting to Patricia, explaining she'd been worried and didn't know what else to do. Lena forgave her, understanding that isolation had consequences beyond her own suffering. It had made people who cared about her feel helpless. I should have just talked to you directly, Mrs. Chen said. I'm sorry I went behind your back. I should have been accessible enough for you to feel like you could, Lena countered. We were both doing our best with limited tools. Patricia visited twice during the renovation, each time calling ahead and staying only as long as she was welcome. She brought furniture from storage that had belonged to Lena's father, a reading chair, a desk, some photographs that had survived her purge. It was her way of apologizing, of acknowledging that Lena's grief deserved space and honor. I kept more than I admitted, Patricia confessed during her second visit, sitting in the garden while watching Connor help Ethan install the new deck. I couldn't bear to have it around because it hurt too much, but throwing it away felt like erasing him, so I put it in storage and pretended it didn't exist. That's not so different from what I did, Lena said quietly. Hiding in this house, avoiding reminders of life before he died. We both struggled with the same pain, we just expressed it differently. I wish I'd understood that sooner. I wish I'd been there for you instead of trying to fix you. You're here now. That's what matters. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Years of difficult dynamics couldn't be undone in a few months. But it was a beginning. Patricia was learning to ask instead of demand, to listen instead of prescribe, to accept that Lena's path to healing wouldn't mirror her own. And Lena was learning that her mother's controlling behavior had come from pain and fear, not malice, which made it easier to set boundaries without anger. The renovation was completed in early October, just as autumn painted the neighborhood in golds and crimsons. The house had transformed from Lena's sanctuary prison into a home that welcomed everyone. Expanded kitchen with space for family dinners, master suite that gave Ethan and Lena privacy while keeping Connor close, studio where Lena could work and create, and a playroom where Connor's energy could explode without constraint. They spent the first night in the completed house together, the three of them, ordering pizza and eating on the new deck while the sun set in brilliant oranges and purples. This is perfect, Connor declared, tomato sauce on his chin. We did a good job. We did an excellent job, Lena agreed, wiping his face with a napkin. All of us together. After Connor was asleep in his new blue room with the window overlooking the garden, Ethan and Lena stood on the deck, arms around each other, surveying the yard that had been the site of so many transformations. Do you remember that first morning? Lena asked, after the storm. You told me you hadn't let a man into your house in 2 years. I was so scared. Of you, of change, of everything. I almost didn't ask for your help. What made you? Desperation at first, but then watching you work, seeing how patient you were, how you didn't push or demand or expect anything, I realized maybe not all people were threats. Maybe some people could be safe. Ethan kissed the top of her head. You made me feel safe too. Safe enough to open up, to trust again, to believe that love didn't have to end in abandonment. We saved each other, didn't we? We saved ourselves. We just did it together. They stood there as the stars emerged one by one until the sky was full of light. Inside, Connor slept peacefully in his new room. Around them, the garden they'd built together rustled in the gentle breeze, and beneath their feet, the foundation they'd repaired stood solid and strong, ready to support whatever they chose to build next. 3 weeks later, on a crisp Saturday morning in late October, Ethan asked Lena to marry him. Not with fanfare or elaborate planning, but while they were planting bulbs that would bloom in spring, their hands dirty and their hearts full. "I want forever with you," he said simply, pulling a simple silver band from his pocket. "I want to build every season together. I want to watch Connor grow up with you by our side. I want to tend gardens and fix problems and create beauty out of broken things, year after year, for as long as we're given." Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes, absolutely yes." Connor, who'd been hiding behind the fence waiting for his cue, erupted with cheers. "She said yes! Dad, she said yes!" They married in December in Lena's backyard, their backyard now, surrounded by friends and neighbors who'd witnessed their journey. Patricia walked Lena down the makeshift aisle, her eyes wet with tears she no longer tried to hide. Marcus served as Ethan's best man, and Connor stood between them, holding the rings with solemn responsibility. "I haven't let a man into my house in 2 years," Lena said during her vows, and gentle laughter rippled through the gathered crowd. "But I let you in, and you taught me that opening doors doesn't have to mean losing myself. You taught me that love can be patient and kind and safe. You taught me that healing happens not by forgetting, but by choosing to live fully anyway." Ethan's vows were equally simple and profound. "You taught me that being alone and being safe aren't the same thing. That walls protect, but they also isolate. That the right person doesn't need you to be perfect, just present, honest, and willing to keep trying. You saw me at my most guarded and loved me anyway. That's a gift I'll spend the rest of my life honoring." When they kissed, Connor cheered louder than anyone, and the celebration that followed was full of joy and laughter and the kind of hope that comes from watching two broken people choose each other and become whole. That night, after the guests had gone and Connor was asleep upstairs, Ethan and Lena sat on their deck wrapped in blankets against the winter cold. "Do you think your father would approve?" Ethan asked quietly. Lena considered the question seriously. "I think he'd love that I'm living again instead of just surviving. That I found someone who sees my scars and doesn't ask me to hide them. That I'm building something new while still honoring what I lost." She leaned against his shoulder. "Yeah, I think he'd approve. I wish I could have met him." "Me too. He would have liked you. Probably would have lectured you about metaphors in nature during those long walks he loved. I would have listened to every word." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their breath mist in the cold air, and Lena thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The girl who'd loved her father completely, the woman who'd been paralyzed by his loss, the recluse who'd hidden from the world. And now this, a wife, a partner, a mother figure to a boy who'd claimed her heart without asking permission. She wasn't fixed. She still had bad days when panic threatened to overwhelm her. She still cried over photographs of her father. She still struggled with crowds and unexpected changes. But she was learning to move through those difficulties instead of being stopped by them, supported by a man who loved her completely and a child who accepted her unconditionally. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For fixing my porch that day, for coming back when you said you would, for being patient when I was difficult, for loving me even when I couldn't quite love myself. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me with your heart when you had every reason not to, for choosing me." "Every day," Lena promised. "I'll choose you every day." And she meant it. Not because she was healed or because all her fears had vanished, but because she'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was loving someone anyway, choosing connection over safety, opening doors even when opening doors terrified you. The garden they'd planted together would sleep through winter and wake in spring. The house they'd renovated would shelter them through storms and sunshine. The life they were building would have challenges and joys, struggles and triumphs, all the messy, beautiful complexity that came with actually living instead of just surviving. But they'd face it together, Ethan with his quiet strength, Lena with her hard-won courage, Connor with his open heart, building something stronger than the sum of their individual parts. Inside the house, the door stood open, warm light spilling out onto the porch. Not locked against the world anymore, not guarding against imagined threats, just open, welcoming the future in all its uncertain possibility. And that, Lena thought as Ethan pulled her closer against the cold, was perhaps the greatest victory of all. She'd survived her grief. She'd faced her fears. She'd stood up to her mother. She'd chosen love over safety, and in doing so, she'd transformed her house from a cage into a home, from a hiding place into a foundation for the life she'd always deserved. The quiet suburban street where it had all begun stretched out before them, peaceful and still. Somewhere a dog barked. A car passed slowly. Normal sounds of normal life, the kind she'd once found unbearable in their ordinariness. Now they felt like music, like promise, like proof that healing was possible, and love could be trusted, and broken, things could be made beautiful again. Ethan's hand found hers in the darkness, their wedding rings catching the starlight, and they sat together watching the world turn, grateful for storms that brought them together and repairs that became rituals and fear that finally learned to speak. Grateful most of all for each other, for Connor, for the chance to start again. The door that had once been too heavy to open now swung freely on well-oiled hinges, and behind it, 3 hearts beat in rhythm, building a life from wreckage, creating light from darkness, proving that sometimes the bravest thing anyone can do is simply stay. Stay open, stay present, stay willing to be known, and that was exactly what they intended to do for all the seasons to come.